Good morning. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We'll be presenting a feature demo covering SLA rules and exporting report data to CSV. Your presenter today is Dave Hodgin, Product Owner of Supportworks ITSM. Delegate audio will be muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, please type them into the GoToWebinar question facility on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. I'll now pass you over to Dave.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the release features. This is hot off the press. We've literally sent out the release notification earlier this week, and I'm going to take you through the features which Pete has mentioned, and also a couple of other things just to let you know how some of the new parts of the system are actually going to work. So we'll launch in with an overview of the list of things we'll look at. First one is the automatic client upgrades, where effectively the client has got a launcher facility which knows what version the server is on, downloads the relevant details, and then launches a correct version of that. I'll take you through in a diagram of that. It takes a little bit to explain what it's doing, but it's fairly straightforward once you're actually using that from the analyst perspective. The next thing we'll look at will be the call profiles. There are quite a few features being put into this. A few highlight on the screenshot in there, but I'll take you through these in a real life scenario. A few things about deactivating profiles. You can have a quick code tab where effectively you assign certain frequent ones which your analysts will use, and a few other features in there as well. Moving on to ITSM, the first one on the list is the import or export of SelfService Wizards. So if you've got a test server and a live server, this facility will be used to move the wizard from one server to another without any need to rekey the information in. The next one is the exporting of report data to CSV file. This will enable you to run additional analysis on these reports, merge different results from different reports together to have a more sort of portfolio report depending on your requirements in here. The final one we're going to look at will be the SLA rules. And one of the key things in here that it takes away from the customization layer, the need to modify the different forms. If you've got, for example, pulling the SLA from a customer, you can then configure that in the system, and it's one of these upgradability features we mentioned in the user group last year, so you can then take a version and then keep upgrading that without the need or concern about your modifications within your system. So if we start off with looking at the client upgrades, and the first thing that happens in here is that effectively there's a client launcher that's installed. Now it's slightly techy, but basically that will need the usual administrative rights to install that, but that should be a once-only task. Once that's installed, then it will then go and check the server to say what version the server is using. The server then replies and saying it's got a certain version. At that particular point, the client launcher has a decision to make. Has it got that version already installed? If it does not, it will download. If it does have it installed, it will then simply launch. So what this is tantamount to from the analyst perspective is that they click their usual shortcut to launch Supportworks as in the client. That will then do all of this checking, and behind the scenes the relevant version will come down from the server, and that version will then be launched. It does mean that the client launcher effectively has some of that logic built in terms of the connection, the communications with the server. But the other end result is that as far as the analyst is concerned, then there's no need for them to know a particular version they're launching. They will launch that and go into the client as normal. One of the main advantages of this area is from the server administrative perspective. So if you, for example, take an upgrade of the Supportworks server version, invariably that will come with a different client version. And before this feature went in, there would be a need fairly close to the time of upgrading the server to roll out a new client. One issue with that is the timing, and the other issue is the fact that rolling out the client will need the relevant rights on the client machine. So both of those are basically taken out of the equation because the client launcher is installed once and you can control when you do that, and it will then check the version, so there's no need to put in a different version further down the line with that. So this should take quite a lot of the overall administrative ownership side out from the server maintenance and allow you to keep on going with upgrades on that. You don't have the challenges within the upgrade scenario, and again the analyst will just pick that up and run with whatever they need to. There are some other features to that, but they're sort of covered within the documentation on this in terms of which server to connect to, etc. But again, a lot of this really should make it a lot more straightforward from your admin perspective and also from the analyst perspective. So if we jump now into the demo of the other pieces. Just log into this. Okay, so within this, the first thing I'm going to take you through will be the call profiles, which I mentioned before. These do predominantly come from the server side. So we just make that a little bit bigger to see a bit more. So you'll notice in here, for example, we've got the usual set of profiles coming in depending on your desk. This is sort of a multifunctional desk. So we've got things like facilities maintenance in here as well. But the main thing I want to point out initially will be this option to deactivate a particular profile. So the scenario is that you develop the desk, and with all the best will in the world, you set out your profiles, and they're all brilliant. Day one, they meet your business requirements. Those requirements change, business changes, the different needs come into play, and you invariably come back and say, well, actually, those profile categories, their structure, etc., doesn't quite meet what you need. So this feature allows you to effectively deactivate these. That has the effect then from the analyst perspective when they're raising a request to say that's not there for them. They don't see that particular option on the list. It does mean that profile still remains within the database, and that has the benefit that you can still run reports against that. You don't have any concern then about removing it in terms of either getting information back, looking at old calls which may have used it, etc. So all of that information is retained, but in terms of new calls going forward, that's deactivated and no longer available to analysts. The next thing I want to point out, we've got this pin to quick code tab, and I'll show you the effect of that in a moment, but if it's down to with the analysts giving them this list of frequent things which they're going to select, and a very easy way for them to find those within the system too. The next aspect to highlight in here, if we have a look at this particular code, we'll notice it ends in a specific 4-character letter. If we go down to a completely different one and try to recreate one underneath that, and we put the same code in, this will tackle the scenario where you create one and it says, do you want to inherit the above? And I've just done it in the wrong level, so let's put that in the correct level. So if we put that in there instead. So what that will do is then come up with this, the profile code already exists. Now, this has been one of the little bugbears with the system for quite a while. Before this, what would have happened was that the new set of categories all below the existing one would have been added into the new one. Without telling you, it's just information that was there, it was all added. There was reason for this at the time, but the value now is that we can add this in to say, prompt you, do you want to use those or do you not want to use those? So it mentions there about duplicate with all of its sub-elements, and the sub-elements are the critical part within this. If we say no to that, we're basically bounced back here, and we can then modify that to different code, and then that should create that as another code in there. We obviously change the text to make that a bit more relevant. So that's the aspect on the, if you like, the administration side of the profiles. And if we now open up a incident call form, we can show you some of the options within the call form as well. So first of all, selecting the profile area. The initial thing to mention is the quick codes tab. So this can be, you can add whatever number you like into this. So these, I say, are effectively the ones which your analysts are going to use frequently. It is still from the admin perspective saying which ones are going to be there, but it does mean that the analysts are then very easy to go in and just select those, assign that to the call without having any real need to go through the various categories in your list. The other thing which we put in is a search facility to enable the analyst to locate different information. So if we cater for going and typing on a laptop, whoops, right. That will then reduce the list and display all of the relevant codes that comply with what you've typed in the search criteria. So it's fairly quick to come up with that. It means an awful lot speedier routes for analysts to actually find the profile they want to use, display those, choose whichever one they need to, and then assign that to the call as required. So let's put a run through an operator script as well. So that's the features to do with the call profiles. Server side, the admin side, very quick for you to set those up, control what you can have access to from the, whether you want to disable, deactivate some, choose whether you want to pin some to the quick codes area. From the analyst perspective, you've also got the option in there to be able to search and actually use those quick codes. So a few things there which will hopefully make that a lot more straightforward to use. The next thing I want to take a look at will be the import and export of SelfService Wizard. So if we close that for a moment, through the settings area, and have a look at the SelfService Wizards. So these are a fairly long list in here, again part of sort of different demonstrations, but basically the thing we've added is this option to do a web self-service utility. This is largely based on the features which have been provided on the business process import and export, so it's using the same sort of, if you like, technology at the background. But what it allows you to do is select one of your particular wizards, provide an export of that. That then creates a file in a certain format on the server, and you've got an option in here to manage those particular files, whether you want to download or delete. You can also upload a new file. So effectively what you do is do an export. You then download that onto your machine somewhere else. You would then do an upload of that file by going into the same area on your test system, uploading a specific file, and that will then make it available to that new server, that different server. You can then do an import, and that will select whichever one you want from the list. And you also need to choose, there's only one here, but you also need to choose which application effectively that is going to be assigned to. Then perform the import, and that will add that to your list of self-service wizards that are available to you. So some of the advantages here, there are invariably various different questions going in, different options going in, and putting that together takes a little bit of time. It takes a bit of confirmation, which you'll normally do within your test environment. Once you've got that confirmed within your test environment, you can then use this utility, bring those wizards across onto your next machine, probably onto your live machine, and effectively load the same information on. So there's no complexity in terms of retyping things in. There's no ownership with that aspect or time required to do that. It's a simple import, or sorry, export from one server, import onto the other, and then that becomes available to the second machine. Next one to have a look at will be the management information and the export of data. So here we have a set of data coming up. We've run a report. This is a system report, and at the bottom of that you'll notice there's an option to export data. Once that's run, you decide to save the file, and that will then be downloaded. Save that, download complete. That's then available. You can open that file in usual spreadsheet applications to modify the data, to look at the data. That data is just the raw information that's gathered within the file, within the report, and you can then perform further analysis on that. You can then do groupings, filterings, pulling things out, different sort of graphs, etc., merging information from different reports and pulling those together if you want to overlay different things to provide more in-depth analysis. Very, very similar features are available within the ITSM route, and again it's provided within the platform side, the system reports, and in terms of the application within the ITSM folder in here. So if we have a look at, for example, all incidents by status, usual options across the top. Let's go back a month, choose a date range, and you've got a link down at the bottom here which will effectively do the similar thing. So that'll go off, create the file, do the same thing with, do you want to export, save that to the same area, and if we save that, place already there, we open that one in the folder, and we can then see that information coming through based on the contents of the report. So this, as I mentioned, gives you quite a lot more flexibility with analysing the data, moving from different machines to different machines, and also the presentation layer of that as well. So it's a fairly simple feature in terms of its use. Obviously, a bit of work in the background to put that together, because it works in all the different types of system reports and the ITSM reports as well. So that gives you quite a bit of flexibility in terms of the overall reporting requirements within the system. The next thing I want to cover is the service level, the SLA rules. Now, the SLA rules themselves are trying to remove the need for you to go in and customize forms. So if we have a look at the incident form, and bring it a little bit closer onto the screen, The usual thing in here, whenever customers look at this, they say, well, we want the SLA to come from somewhere else. We need a different sort of default coming in there. The challenge is that whenever you start going into design the form to change some of those things, or indeed go into the data dictionary to modify the default settings for some of these areas, you're effectively customized or modified that data dictionary. Now, some of these may be fairly straightforward to put back in, but what we're trying to do is remove the need to do that. And this means that you can then, from the, if you like, the overall ownership of the Supportworks instance, you're far more likely to be able to stay on an out-of-the-box version. There's no need to go in and do different bits of customization. Once you're on an out-of-the-box, you're then on the standard releases. That makes, obviously, support aspect a lot more straightforward. There's less of a need to check for customizations involved in that. But it also means that you can then take the upgrade routes. So you install a new version, you can compare that with the existing version, and then if need be move to the new version with absolutely minimal effort, basically copying a data dictionary over onto the new system. So that means that you can then stay on that route, take all those advantages, and still with this feature of the SLA rules be able to determine where's that SLA going to come from whenever we're logging an instance, for example. I'll show you a few things in a moment about how it's set up, but just as a quick example in here, if we choose an analyst, customer in here, and we should find a moment that then displays a particular SLA and priority. So this is a managed service level bronze service and a priority linked with that. If, however, we choose a different customer, we'll notice that that SLA and priority has now changed. So that's all using the SLA rules. There's no modification on the form. It's a standard out-of-the-box version to be able to work with this particular feature. So it's modified that in the form. I've demonstrated with a customer, but as we'll see in a moment, that really is just one scenario in which you can use this. So if we go in and manage the service level agreements, there's a new tab in here saying the SLA rules. And the first thing is you have all your various call classes in here. So if we go down to incident, and we notice there's the default SLA and priority that has appeared. We also notice down the left-hand side that we've got a list, and there's a sequence to this list of where the source of the SLA should come from. So effectively what happens is it will go through this list of rules, and it will find one that it matches. Once it finds one that it matches, it will then pull out the SLA from that if it exists, and then apply that to the particular call which you're raising, again based on the call class that's mentioned above. If there are no matches from that particular list, it will then fall back to the default SLA, and that will then be appearing on the form. So it's a fairly straightforward way for you to create and manage these. And if you do want to add different ones into play, let me just get a screen where I can see that. We've got an option over here to do an add, and that will have the call class because that's one we've already selected. And you then choose the source of the rule. So the SLA can be pulled from quite a long list: charge centers, departments, organization sites. So these are the frequent ones which will be used in most occasions. I would reckon that you can then simplify how you're going to use particular SLA rules. So, oops. You go back to that screen. The other thing just to note in here, there's a tick box to say using the rules. This effectively caters for people who are upgrading from, for example, an ITSM 4.0 system, where they potentially have gone in and modified some things in the forms. So if that's obviously ticked, it will use particular rules that are listed here. If there's no tick in that particular box, then that will default to your previous method of whatever you have on the form to respect what's on that particular form to load that up. But this is, say, will come from this particular version 4.1. So if you're taking this, you've got the option to use this, this feature and build that up within the rest of your system. What I'll do now is just take you through the one or two of the forms, one or two of the areas where we go into customers, for example. Manage customers. We search for Anna B, which you notice we used a moment ago. and have a look at Anna B. And we'll notice on the right hand side here the call class default SLAs, there are none in there. And that's the reason when we chose Anna B that didn't match on the customer side, so went back to the default and applied the bronze SLA from the default for that particular call class. We can, when we're in here, go in and choose other ones. So fairly much as before, you've got your add option, you choose a particular call class, and then you choose whichever SLA name you want for that particular one, and once you've chosen that, you can enter the priority in there as well. So that's the coming from the customer perspective. If we have a look through at the organization form, and on the organization form, if we just have a jump through to, for example, departments in here, and again we've got the service level agreements, and here's the option, very, very same as before, adding a new one in, making that available onto this particular form. So let's just add in an incident in there, whoops, and pick an SLA name, silver, you can choose a priority, obviously priority is linked back to particular SLA, and add that record to the system. So provided that's then put into your SLA rules, then you can go through and pull the SLA from the department. In this case, you can choose whether that department is above or below the customer in terms of the relative sequence, the order in which that rule is going to be applied. So you've got quite a lot of flexibility within this. There are quite a few areas with the organizations, departments, sites, quite a few parts of the system where you can actually add these call class default SLAs into play and then assign those through the particular request which you're using. So those are the features which we have put in within the Supportworks 8.1 and ITSM 4.1. I do want to highlight one other thing which we have put in which wasn't there within the 4.0, and it links in with quick log calls. Now, there's a little bit of a kind of reason why we didn't put in the resolve close tab within the log call form. It effectively got fairly complex with the way the code was working, and also didn't work sort of from a user perspective running it through. So what we've done, we've effectively done a little bit of extension of this to give you a bit more features from it. The main thing is that the usual aspect features apply whenever you're logging an incident. You can enter different pieces of information here, and you've got the usual option to save as a quick log call. So that will store effectively the information you're seeing on this particular form. There's an additional entry on the show me item for each of the log call forms, and this will allow you to store the resolution details. And on this screen, it's effectively a different form coming up to show you the information which is available to store for the resolution. And you'll note that this is basically the same set that you've got whenever you're previously had the resolve form on the same form as the log tab, the log call form. So you can choose where the information is coming from. You can put a default time against that. You can choose resolution codes, file attachment. You can put in support units, etc. as well. So all the same sort of functionality. Choosing to update, call to be chargeable, etc. Again, as before, just a little bit of a side note in these. There's some of these entries in here, certainly the call to be chargeable only applies when you're closing the call, not when you're resolving it. So that's respecting the functionality that was already there on the system before. So all of this works in with all of that existing functionality. So if we now add that record, and we now do a save as a quick log call, and we put that in as demo 3, save that into the system. So if we now close that and come back in a little while later and decide we're going to use that demo 3. So first things we note from that, it's obviously got my wonderfully random text appearing within the summary and the description. If we click on the log and resolve this particular point, then that will then take that information. You'll notice the time spent is 44, it's set to public, add to knowledge base. It's also got the support units displaying as well. So all of the features and functionality are there as before, but it does mean, just as the advantage to this, if I close that for now, that if you're looking at a particular quick log call, you've got the option at this point to actually go in and look at those details. So that's effectively giving you a review of what's in there as well. So you can go through and have a look at those, check those, if need be, change them either here or whenever you're doing the resolution of that. So that's one of the things I wanted to let you know about that, because it's a slightly different way of making sure you go through the storing the resolution details there from the show me item. But once you've got the hang of that, when you're creating the quick log calls, then the rest of it basically flows as it did before. So you've got your log call form coming up, you then click the log and resolve, and you then follow the functionality through as before on the resolution form. So that takes you through the information in terms of how to use that particular piece, and the various other bits which we have covered as well. I would also like to point out that within the, since the release of 4.0, we've done what I would like to think is a sterling job, and hopefully you can comment if you think otherwise, but we've done a sterling job in getting all of the main defects in there as fixed. There are one or two outstanding, or a few outstanding. They're all within the release notes. You can go in there and see if they particularly affect you. But we've covered over about 90% of the actual defects were raised within the 4.0. Pardon me. So we've also gone through, and with our own QA scenario, we've gone through the various testing on that as well. Obviously, anything that's come up with that has been resolved as well. So that adds up to hopefully quite a robust system for you to work with. Same thing applies on the platform side. The various things which were raised to do with the platform. The resolutions are in there for those particular issues. So hopefully based on that, you've got a system which you can now use. It's fairly robust. It's moved on quite away from the 4.0. You've got features coming in there. You've got things which are beneficial both on the server admin side, the system administration side with the call profiles, the analyst perspective with various things to do with the whether it's using profiles, using the SLA rules, getting the calls logged quickly and more easily within the system. So it all follows through from trying to get the system a lot more upgradable, a lot more features in there which you can start to use. So that covers what I was going to have a chat with you about. I'll now put you on mute for a little moment while I check through if there are any questions. Hello. So there's a question to do with the profiles, the called profile features, and being able to deactivate those. And the question is whether those deactivated profiles will be visible within self-service. Within the self-services which we have within this particular release, they shouldn't be available in there. I would like to point out that we have a new version of the self-service which is coming out fairly shortly. It's scheduled for early Q3, which we're obviously in at present. We're in the final stage of getting the last pieces of functionality into that, and then we'll be doing the various work obviously to wrap it up from the QA perspective to make that ready for release. That's got a complete new look and feel. All of the feedback we're getting so far from various people who've looked at it's a lot cleaner. It's an awful lot nicer to use. It flows an awful lot more. You've got more information on the screen. There's not really a need to have different pop-ups coming up, so more information is to hand. Various things about, again, searching for services an awful lot more fluent for the customer to be able to use. So more features coming in that, and that should be out fairly soon. Just to mention as well, one of the other things which we're looking to release fairly shortly will be the Supportworks mobile. And the Supportworks mobile is an app. It's a native app initially running on both the iOS and the Android platforms. Once you've got that particular one, it will allow you to go through and do your basic call maintenance tasks. So you'll be able to see your calls on the screen. You'll be able to do your updates, etc. from those, providing that interaction whenever you're out on the move. Various information, so you can view information about customers, organization, configuration items. So that'll be an initial release of that, and that will then be available within the platform requirement to take that. But once you've got that particular platform, then there'll be other options, and we can work on other features to modify that as well. So those are the main things which have come up. If there are any other questions, then do feel free to get in touch. Hopefully this has been beneficial to you, and I'll look forward to showing you the next webinar, which I believe is next week on the Supportworks mobile. So look forward to hearing from you then.